So thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to Stewart McMillan for the opportunity to discuss this important subject. Just in passing, you did make reference to the 1820 martyrs. Gil Patterson, our colleague, had a members' debate on that on the 5th of September 2001, which happened to be the third debate in which I participated when I joined this Parliament. And of course, that was important to me because John Baird was my great uncle. However, to the matter in hand, I think there are many places across Scotland that we could consider for a museum, but the sugar warehouse in James Watt Dock in Greenock is perhaps one of the most significant symbols of Scotland's relationship with slavery, and as such, it would be perfect to juxtapose brutal human costs of slavery next to a symbol of Scotland's economic wealth. I believe it's hard for a modern person to recognise our connection to that time. But as my grandfather was an infant when Abraham Lincoln managed to abolish slavery in the United States, the temporal distance may be shorter than some of us might care to imagine. The human psyche has a habit of distancing itself from unpleasant things, how much more so when the subject is slavery, something as violent and abhorrent as that. But the brutal legacy, and indeed of much of colonialism, belongs to us as much as anything else does as well. The museum on this topic could be in many places, perhaps in the northeast that I represent, as elsewhere. We only need to consider the Powers Gates in Aberdeen, built by Hugh Fraser Leslie in 1834. The gate itself features carvings of slaves on it, making direct reference to the several coffee plantations that he owned in Jamaica. But it doesn't end there. There are former students from Marshall College who became involved in the slave trade. There were those who inherited wealth from it. There were even those who were involved in the abduction of slaves from Africa itself. You see, no matter where you're from in this nation, there will be at least some connection to this dark part of our history. The museum gives us the opportunity to take some responsibility, but it's far from being the final and only step in doing so. It's a first and very useful step. It can represent a new chapter in our maturation as a nation and our own maturation as human beings. Responsibility we have to uphold the human rights of all people in the present and recognise our failings in the past. We shouldn't pretend the unpleasant past never happened by simply trying to erase it. I think in that sense I've heard some interesting comments, and I share the belief that we shouldn't tear down statues, but we should ensure that we rewrite the context in which they exist, because they remind us of a dark past that we shouldn't seek to erase. The museum could represent a signal that we've come to recognise the iniquities of our predecessors. Our society should today reward honesty, growth and knowledge, but its benefits as a museum will go much further than that, forcing us to look at the truth of our own past brutality. We, if we are anything as human beings, carry compassion. I hope that whenever this museum is established, we share responsibility for our history through it. I hope that inspires us to be the best that we can be, that we will be compassionate, and that this establishment would be a light to guide us out of darkness and of ignorance. I end by congratulating Stewart McMillan on his championship of local interests. That's exactly the exemplar we should look to all our members and to the interests of his constituency. I'm happy to support his efforts. Presiding Officer.